So we're continuing on to our next realm of South America, which is pretty easy to find because it is literally the continent of South America. The biggest country is Brazil, and we'll kind of highlight some other ones as well as we go. So again, make sure you know the concepts, ideas, and terms from the chapter. Maybe a longer list than this. I've highlighted a few that we're going to be talking about. But make sure you understand what they all mean. All right, so one thing, let's start off by talking a little bit about population and culture. Just in terms of numbers, Brazil is a massive country. It's over 200 million people, one of the larger countries in the world. It's the 5th largest country in the world. But it dwarfs the populations of other countries. The other two after that are Colombia or Argentina, which have around 40 million people, pretty close to each other. But the big country here, the dominant country by far in South America, is Brazil. And we'll also talk about different cultures because there's geographic patterns where you have African cultures, indigenous cultures, what's called mestizo or kind of mixed cultures, and also part of South America is very European. So we'll talk about some of those geographic differences as well. And we'll also look at some of the difference in agriculture. I won't dwell on this because we've talked about it, but to remind you, we have a mix of subsistence agriculture where, it's grown for household use. You eat what you grow, and also commercial agriculture, large-scale for-profit agriculture, including plantations. And we will see examples of both plantations historically and also modern commercial agriculture in parts of South America. So this is a figure showing some of the different agricultural systems. You have plantations along the coastal areas, and these have been here historically, kind of relic of the colonial system. You have a type of called shifting cultivation, a type of subsistence agriculture in the interior in the Amazon basin, different kinds of indigenous and subsistence agriculture in the Andes Mountains, and also modern commercial agriculture in the south. And another thing we'll highlight is the concept of uneven development, that there is a higher amount of economic activity concentrated in urban areas and lower development in rural areas outside of the cities. There's also going to be high amounts of rural to urban migration of people moving from the countryside into cities to get work. And in fact, South America is quite urban. It's 82% urban, which compared to worldwide is quite high. And it has 3 megacities. So Mexico City, that we've covered in the past, can be considered a megacity, generally over 10 million people. These are just massive urban areas, and there's 3 of them. And so in North America, we would have New York City and Los Angeles. In Middle America, we'd have Mexico City, and then we have 3 additional ones in South America. In Brazil, we have Sao Paulo with over 20 million people. Also Buenos Aires in Argentina with over 10 million. And also Rio de Janeiro, also in Brazil, with over 10 million people. So these are also considered megacities like Los Angeles or New York, or Mexico City for that matter. And we'll also look at some of the subregions, the way that we kind of divide these up to study them. So Brazil, the country of Brazil itself, like the country of Mexico, is big enough to warrant being its own region. Then we have what's called the Caribbean North. We'll kind of look at those. Those have a lot more in common with Central America and the Caribbean. And then we have the Andean West. This is where the Inca Empire was. Still a very strong indigenous presence there. And then we have the Southern Cone, because it looks like the cone of an ice cream, where you have much stronger European settlement and presence. In some way, the Southern Cone has a lot in common with places like North America, both in terms of its climate and also in terms of its settlement patterns.